In his first interview post his exit from Canada and after coming back into India, recalled Indian envoy Sanjay Verma has accused Canadian politicians of promoting Khalistan for quote-unquote electoral gains. Escalating the attack on Justin Trudeau, the diplomat told PTI that Canada had a very small number of Khalistani supporters who managed to shout the loudest and gain political patronage. He also said just about 10,000 Sikhs in Canada are hardline Khalistanis. A handful of them have made Khalistan a business in Canada. He also said Khalistanis are indulging in human trafficking and gun running. He also added that these Khalistanis collect money through gurudwaras for business and went on to say that they intimidate other Sikhs by threatening their families. He contended that Canadian politicians promote Khalistan for electoral gains and further contended that Khalistani supporters shout the loudest and gain political patronage.
Look, today I would say that about 10,000 of people in the Sikh community in Canada would be hardline Khalistanis.
Only 10,000?
Only 10,000. So it's just a handful. But they have made Khalistan into a business. In the name of Khalistan, they do human trafficking, they do drug trafficking, they do gun running. So they earn a lot of money through that. Then a lot of money would be collected in the gurudwaras, place of reverence and religious worship. And then they would use a part of that money into all nefarious jobs. So what then they do is, since that is the business for them, then these 10,000 intimidate others to join in. जो क्रिमिनल्स हैं, जो टेररिस्ट हैं, जो एक्सट्रीमिस्ट हैं, उनके अगेंस्ट हम कोई एक्शन नहीं लेते हैं, तो वो भी एक तरह का प्रोत्साहन ही है. तो वो प्रोत्साहन वहाँ पर काफ़ी देखा जाता है, चाहे वो डोमेस्टिक वोट बैंक के लिए हो या फिर कोई और राजनीतिक कारण के लिए हो.
Lambasting Canada's claims on naming him person of interest in the Nijjar killing plot, he said Hardeep Nijjar was a terrorist for Bharat. He also said that anything extrajudicial is wrong in a democracy and he mentioned that truth must come out in the Nijjar killing case. He added that Bharat has never done anything covert and that Canada has not shared a shred of evidence till date.
Nijjar was a terrorist to us. But then anything which is extrajudicial for any democracy, any rule of law country is wrong. So it was wrong for us as well. We always told them that we want to reach the bottom of the whole episode so that you are satisfied, we are satisfied. But unfortunately, so far, despite whatever talks they have done in public, we have not seen a shred of evidence.
Now, while speaking with us here on the Right Stand on CNN News 18, the recalled envoy to Canada, Sanjay Verma, had flagged concerns 6 months ago while speaking on the Khalistani issue. 6 months later, speaking for the first time after exit, he says how he was backstabbed. At that time, he had said even though they fear for their safety and their concerns, he was confident that the Canadian authorities will cooperate and help and ensure their security. Today, he feels he's been backstabbed.
After a bit of conversation, then they told me that I, along with 5 other Indian diplomats and officials, are persons of interest in the inquiry of killing of Nijjar. And therefore, there was a request to waive off my diplomatic immunity as well as diplomatic immunity of my colleagues. This demonstrates kind of a backstabbing.
See, there is something which we have said time and again, and that is that there is political space given to these Khalistani terrorists and extremists based out of Canada. And this political space has been creating difficulties, and the kind of space which are given now, I think it will create much more difficult scenarios for the future. I see a lot of narratives created by the Khalistani elements here, pro-Khalistan elements here, who have got patronage from some of these elected leaders. So yes, that is being peddled on various kinds of propagandist social media, and that is my worry. We had maintained our position on that we need something relevant and specific to see, for us to look into it. Unfortunately, nothing of that kind has been shared so far. The threat itself will not go off till the time the core concern is not addressed. So till the time you have Khalistani terrorists and extremists living in Canada and they are not taken to account, they will continue threatening us.
And it's a CNN News 18 mega exclusive that we now bring to you. CNN News 18 decodes the nexus of the ISI, Punjab youth and gangsters in Canada. Intel sources have told CNN News 18 that Canada has resorted to non-cooperation in the guise of freedom of expression. Letter rogatories and Interpol notices are all pending in Canada without them moving an inch on it. And that Justin Trudeau and his administration successfully playing the game of the ISI to keep the Sikh diaspora engaged, thinking that this Khalistan narrative is what is going to get them votes. The youth of Punjab are first taken to Canada, forced to speak and act against Bharat. These men are then wanted by Bharat and they get easy visa access to Canada with the help of the ISI so that they can do more crimes from Canadian soil against Bharat, activities that are nefarious in the first place. And these are all wanted. It's a long laundry list. 5-6 of them, we have already submitted letter rogatories who are active in Pakistan, in Canada right now and working at the edges of the ISI in cahoots with them. The likes of Arsh Dalla, the likes of Goldie Brar, the likes of Sandeep Sidhu. There are many like this, some of them finding employ even with the Canadian administration. Intel sources have further said that these letter rogatories are long pending with the Canadian authorities. Ramnik Maan, activist with us, Terry Milashki, author with us, Abhishek Banerjee, columnist with us. Namaste, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much. Now, what happened with the Trudeau administration last night is one aspect, that there is pressure building against Justin Trudeau. The other aspect is there is active evidence, not credible allegations, against these entities who are now operating in Canadian soil. Ramnik Maan, how? And then you have Sanjay Verma who says, I feel backstabbed.
Well, Anand, there are 2-3 very quick points that I'd like to make. Number one is amongst the diaspora, the Indian diaspora in Canada, Hindus outnumber Sikhs by about 100,000. And as per Mr. Sanjay Verma, there are about 10,000 odd Khalistanis who are radicalized. So as vote bank is concerned, unless, the diaspora steps forward and shows their own strength in terms of how they would vote or how the voting pattern will be, these people will continue to exploit the political landscape in Canada, number one. Number two, well, of course, we all understand that the Five Eyes, including Canada, US, UK, New Zealand, Australia, they've been patronizing Khalistanis, they've been patting them on the back, and they've allowed people like, Nijjar and Pannu to peddle an anti-India narrative. Well, if they want a Khalistan for themselves, and US and Canada are very large countries, they can allocate them space, and they can have a dance, a ball around their flag if they want to. Also, one aspect which is very, very pertinent to mention here is that persistently, despite requests by the government of India for extradition or for arrest, they have not done anything. They have not moved a muscle over these years. So, if they're not acting against people who are designated terrorists in India, if they are patronizing them, if they are using them within their country for their personal political gains, I mean, Anand, the very relevant question here is, how is Canada any different from Pakistan then? Because Pakistanis have been using these K elements for a very long time against India.
Correct.
And it has been a part of their state policy. And apparently, when the Canadian Prime Minister on the floor of the Parliament refers to a designated terrorist as an honorable citizen of Canada, it appears very clearly that even Canada is using terrorism against India as its state policy. So I now feel that the Indian diplomacy, the Indian outreach should be working or operating in a way where we turn the heat onto the Canadians and ask them to act against Pannu and others who've been, persistently threatening. I remember from last year, it was 19th of November 2023, if I'm correct, that he'd first given a warning against Air India.
September,
or people asking them not to fly Air India.
Yeah, Pannu,
and then
Pannu.
the threats
Yes,
came
correct.
about the Indo-Canadian Hindus to leave Canada or their visas to be cancelled and they be ousted from Canada. I mean, if this is how they're going to behave and act, and the larger diaspora, the community, the Hindus and pro-Indian Sikh, if they keep quiet and they allow the 10,000 odd, as per Mr. Sanjay Verma, radicals to take over the narrative,
Right.
I think it's a very bad situation for a country like Canada.
Right. Now, intel sources have also told CNN News 18 that Canada is not sensitive about the demands of Bharat. Sikh for Justice Chief and Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is operating from the UK, US and Canada, giving every possible threat, but there is no response by the country. Indian missions, Hindus, Sikhs have been attacked by the SFJ. They've been verbally threatened. They've been socially threatened. Their families' profiles have been put on social media, and there has been intimidation that's happened. But despite many requests by Bharat, there has been no action against them. Sources have also said,
Pakistan of the West.
yeah, and SFJ has also threatened Indian ambassadors and missions, along with a role in the murders and extortion gangs operating in Punjab here in Bharat. Now, moreover, Sandeep Singh Sidhu, employed by the Canadian Border Service Agency, has links with Khalistani terrorists such as Lakhbir Singh and US-based Gurjot Kaur. He is wanted in the murder of a Shaurya Chakra awardee. It is important for Bharat to probe Sandeep's role. Meanwhile, Arsh Dalla is also radicalizing youth in criminal activities, and many attacks have happened after his appeal. So these are all issues which the Canadian authorities are aware of, and there is credible proof. Terry Mileski, how would you see this? And also, what happened in the caucus last evening? Your take.
Okay, I'll give you a quick answer on that one first, and that is that what happened was the first sounding of the death knell for Justin Trudeau's political career, perhaps not the very first, but 24 MPs, what he's got about, I think it's 152, so it's not a majority, but it's still scary if you're trying to hang on to your job as leader of the Liberal Party. It's not going well for him. I continue to believe that he won't lead the Liberals in the next election, which is due next year. As for the question before us about what do we do about people who are in Canada and apparently threatening, but threatening quite cleverly under Canadian law? Let's give you an example. You're talking about Pannoon. Pannoon says that he puts up posters saying, calling Indian diplomats killers, and wants to hang them, and basically he is deliberately endangering their safety. Now, it seems to me that the free speech arguments fall down at that point. But so far, for years and years, I'm talking about 40 years, Canadian governments of all political stripes, not just the Liberals, have been very reluctant to do their duty and grasp that nettle and take it to court. And okay, there might be a battle. Well, he didn't say, for example, Pannoon again. Pannoon didn't say that he was going to blow up Air India. He just said, you could be risking your life if you fly Air India. Now, that's what he said. Now, then he said, oh, no, I just meant a boycott. Well, come on. How does a boycott threaten your life? It doesn't. It's pretty clear that he means something other than what he's saying. So he thinks, sometimes he's a little too clever, is my point. So I believe that there are many cases where a more courageous approach, a more determined approach by the Canadian authorities, regardless of political stripe, as I say, would benefit both sides. We'd get rid of some people that we don't, that are not doing Canada any good, and India would get the return. But on the other side, there is also a weakness in the Indian case sometimes. If you could read, for example, the judgment of Justice Patel of the Delhi High Court, in which he approved of the government of India's designation of Sikhs for Justice as a terrorist organization. Well, read it, and then tell me what terrorist act did Panoon commit? It's not easy to find it. And you know, you're welcome to write to me and tell me, okay, look at this paragraph, this shows that he did. Well, it's not obvious in many of these cases that just designating somebody as a terrorist means that under Canadian law, there's a prosecution to be had. It's more complicated than that.
No, so but a U.S. national in an Indian origin U.S. national or a student made an utterance in America, and he was put behind bars immediately when he issued a verbal threat. So how can you have different standards for different times? And who are these entities who are calling for accountability? There is proof that's been given for some of the other citizens who have committed acts of crime, and they are also gangsters in Canada. Where is the arrest for them? Where is the action for them? And why is it that you have federal operatives who are giving Gurpatu and Panoon a cow of fire? So much so, Abhishek Banerjee, that the American ambassador to India, US ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, tries to draw a line between verbal threats and actual threats. Quite rich coming from the US. And what does that mean? That is this all largely being orchestrated by the American deep state, the CIA? Even what Pakistani narrative was, perhaps was it choreographed by the CIA and American deep state?
Yeah, so Anand, so I would say that so much has been said on this topic that I wonder what new I can say. I guess the only new thing I can add is some historical perspective so that even Indians know what we are dealing with in terms of the Trudeau political dynasty. You see, the Trudeau dynasty, it has a long history of collaborating with everyone. Khalistanis, Nazis, fascists. We know that the mastermind, the person who became the mastermind of the Kanishka bombings, India had repeatedly asked for that person to be extradited to India. Pierre Trudeau did not listen, and now you see what has gone on. Remember that when Justin Trudeau came to India, he brought with him this guy who had actually been convicted in Canada itself for an assassination attempt against a minister from our Punjab. Now, that's for Khalistanis. I should also add that about 5-6 years ago, there was a spat between Canada and Russia, where Justin Trudeau, he expelled 4 Russian diplomats. And the reason he had for that was that the Russian diplomats had exposed that his deputy prime minister, Chrystia Freeland, her family were hardcore Nazi leaders in Ukraine. Now, she's not responsible for what her family has done, but why is the Trudeau government trying to cover it up? Because the Trudeau government has always had a soft corner for Nazis. We know that last year, Justin Trudeau's government invited somebody from the dreaded SS Galizia regiment of the Ukrainian Nazis. And that's the...
Chrystia Freeland, by the way, is not a Nazi. What that reference to, that story is extremely overhyped and overtalked. Her grandfather was a Ukrainian who was dragooned into this role of publishing a newspaper which the Nazis read. It's grossly overhyped, and it's an attempt to wrongly tar Chrystia Freeland as some kind of Nazi. It's absurd. Even if her grandfather was a Nazi, it doesn't say anything about her or about the subject before.
But my problem is that for all this talk about righteousness and also logic, etc., Ramneek Man, why is it Justin Trudeau not turning around and asking Jagmeet Singh, if you want a Khalistan, where is Nankana Sahib? Where is Kartarpur corridor? Why is Lahore not the capital? Why is there no Pakistan there? If you really are talking about Sikh nationalism, where is the true Punjab? Why aren't you asking for rights to the Jhelum waters?
That is very true. As a matter of fact, I personally, feel that, well, since it's a very well coordinated effort between the Five Eyes and the ISI, and these people are being used, I personally feel, honestly, and I would back this with a lot of evidence that Nijjar was being used by the Canadian CSIS. And now Panu is being used by the CIA and CSIS and ISI alike. And the day his use is over, they will dump him like a hot potato. And referring to Talvinder Parmar, let me remind you that on 20th of October in BC, Surrey, there was a memorial. He was remembered. There was a huge program in Guru Nanak Sikh Temple, Surrey. So this is how they're permitting to celebrate the killers of Canadians. not just Indians, but also Canadians. Let me also add for Terry here. Terry, do you know that within Canada, there is a demand for Alberta, British Columbia, Cascadia, Newfoundland Island and Labrador, Quebec, Saskatchewan, Vancouver Island, Nova Scotia, Alberta and Manitoba? Why don't you first address these issues within your country? You divide your country, balkanize Canada, make these smaller nations, let people have a taste of how they can earn sovereignty and the freedom from Canada before you start to advocate, or your country or your prime ministers or your establishment or your CSIS or your CIA or the Five Eyes start to advocate free speech. When people talk about balkanizing India, how about it?
Let Terry answer that. He has a very strong point of view on those actions by the Trudeau administration. So yes, Terry.
It's probably not as strong as mine. He's simply pointing his finger at the wrong guy. Because I for 20 years have been campaigning to stop the disgusting spectacle of posters glorifying Dalvinder Parmar as a great hero of the Sikh nation. I think it's an absolute disgrace, and all parties should have long ago stopped that, and they haven't. I've gone much further than you also in terms of the...
I was talking about the free speech narrative that the Canadian government keeps spelling out. Why don't you allow these people a separate nation? Why don't you first allow these people to hold a referendum?
The Trudeau administration standards of free speech were shown how shallow they are when they arrested a journalist who put out a post against Justin Trudeau. Yes, Terry, please complete.
I am not an advocate for the Khalistanis in Canada, okay?
I agree, I know. You're not, I know.
All right, well, stop this. Why don't you do this? Why, I'm doing what I can, and I think I've done more than you so far.
You means your government, sir. You don't take it personally.
I don't defend the government. I'm not here to speak for the government. I'm simply saying there is a legitimate and real difference of views between India and Canada on what constitutes free speech, and Canada has gone not far enough in dealing with hate speech, and they've also failed to introduce legislation, as for example the British have, to outlaw the glorification of terrorism, which would apply to the glorification posters of the Air India bomb.
Yeah, but the sad part is, Terry, that part of the Five Eyes, the UK, is also allowed these elements of free run, and they have also violated their own laws while extending this. So that begs me to ask this question. Final minute to Abhishek. Is there a larger game at play? Are these the unseen hands which are actually prompting the likes of Canada, the ISI, and encouraging them to do this against Bharat on a deliberate narrative to try and keep this pinprick on? Abhishek?
Hello. Yeah. So, I mean, Canada is a satellite state of the United States. Anything that Canada does has to happen with the sanction of the US. The US is a superpower. Of course, it will never show its hands openly. What it used to do in the past with Pakistan, today they are doing it through Canada. If I was Canadian, I would be quite ashamed and really concerned about that. Canada is now America's replacement for Pakistan.
Well, again, Pakistan of the West, is that an adage that Canada would want, and especially under this Trudeau administration, that terminology, that idiom is increasingly getting finding chorus, at least in this part of the world. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your thoughts. With that, we call it a wrap on this edition of The Right Stand. Zakar Reddy with Brass Tacks.